The court said, go ahead.
No. I wouldn't characterize what I said that way.
Okay. But I understand you correctly that cryptocurrency only exists through the blockchain, right?
For it to be a cryptocurrency, it would need to at some point be on the blockchain. But that doesn't mean what you're doing doesn't involve cryptocurrency.
And you testified about exchange credits, right?
Yes.
And those are notations on internal databases, right?
In this case, yes.
Yeah. And those internal databases, they're not on the blockchain, right?
In my understanding, the credit system was not on the blockchain.
The Coinbase internal credits, those are off-chain, that's what Coinbase calls it, right?
They call it an internal distributed ledger system, but yes. They could have called it credits or anything else, but that's what they call it. That's on their website, yes. And that's
Okay. But
the usage of Coinbase.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. Yeah, go ahead.
The court said, when you say they, who are you referring to?
The witness said, sorry. Me?
The court said, yes.
The witness said, sorry. Can you repeat back? When did I say they? Sorry.
The court said, if you just please restate the answer, the question and the answer.
You said that Coinbase.
The court said, I'm asking for the reporter to read it back.
Mr. Horton said, sorry.
Record read.
Sorry. Yes, by they, I meant Coinbase. It's part of the usage of Coinbase. But it's also publicly available, as an explanation, how Coinbase operates.
The court said, go ahead.
Mr. Horton said, thank you, Your Honor.
By Mr. Horton.
The internal database at Coinbase, Ms. Sklar, that you're just describing now, that's not on the blockchain. Correct?
That's my understanding, without also revealing anything that I'm not allowed to reveal. I'm only going to discuss things that are publicly available.
Understood. These internal databases where an exchange keeps their credits. They're not publicly available, right?
The internal database, no.
And the Himalaya Exchange's internal database, where its credit transactions are located. That's not publicly available, right?
That's my understanding.
You haven't seen the Himalaya Exchange's internal database, isn't that right?
I have not.
And you testified about what you expect to see on a centralized exchange's ledger, isn't that right?
Mr. Sklar said, objection.
What's usual or could be?
The court said, you may answer.
What's usual or could be, but every centralized exchange is allowed to, frankly, have its own model.
And you don't know, sitting here today, whether the Himalaya Exchange's private ledger matches your expectations, isn't that right?
Sorry. My expectations of?
Well, you just testified about what's usual at a centralized exchange, isn't that right?
Yes.
Sitting here today, you haven't looked at the Himalaya Exchange's internal ledger, isn't that right?
Right.
So you have no way of opining about whether the Himalaya Exchange's actual internal ledger matches your expectations of what's usual at a centralized exchange. Isn't that true?
I haven't seen it, so I can't really say either way. I have, as I just said. I haven't seen it.
Your testimony today was that the Himalaya Exchange is designed to be a centralized exchange, right?
Yes.
And that means that some person or group of people control its operations, isn't that true?
Yes.
Do you know who those people are?
I've seen the diagrams and the, organizational charts. I haven't memorized them. But I've seen them.
And who gave those to you?
They're in a document that may or may not be an exhibit. There's a business plan.
And, sorry, who gave that document to you, the org chart at the exchange, before you testified?
The lawyers, but it's in the Himalaya Exchange business plan. It may even be in the white paper as well. In fact, in the white paper, there are bias in there. The org chart is in their business plan, as I recall.
And so because it's designed to be a centralized exchange. That means there's some group of people with control over this internal database that you haven't seen. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now some centralized exchanges sell crypto tokens directly to customers' wallets, isn't that true?
Yes.
It's possible to use Coinbase, for example, bring your own wallet as a customer. And receive and hold crypto token yourself, isn't that right?
Mr. Skirek said, objection, compound.
The court said, "You're asking whether it can be done?"
Mr. Horton said, "I can break it down a little bit, Your Honor."
The court said, "Okay, go ahead."
If a person goes to Coinbase with their own wallet, they can obtain cryptocurrency to hold themselves directly, isn't that true?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The court said, "You may answer."
Now, but that wasn't always the case.
But it's true now, isn't it?
It is true now. It took time though.
And Coinbase. Not the only centralized exchange where you can show up with your own wallet and get crypto tokens to store in your wallet. Isn't that right?
Yes.
But in the Himalaya ecosystem, customers could not hold H-coin tokens in their own wallets. Isn't that true?
At that time, but that's not what the plan was, according to the white papers.
Well, I'm not asking about the plan. Is it currently the case, right now, today, that you can hold H-coin tokens in a customer wallet?
As of today, I don't believe so.
Okay. In fact, all that Himalaya exchange customers can buy are credits, right?
Right now? I think so.
Well, what about for the entire period of your review?
I mean, the plan was, obviously, for.
I'm sorry. I'm going to just interrupt you really quickly, Ms. Sklar. Because I'm not asking you about the plan or the future or anyone's intentions.
Mr. Skirek said, Your Honor, can she be allowed to answer the question?
The court said, "Right. So he's asking you not about what they may have planned to do but what they actually did."
Sure. At the time, yes.
In fact, isn't it true, Ms. Sklar, that even in the white papers, stating their intentions, the Himalaya exchange said that customers couldn't hold any crypto assets at all in the Himalaya ecosystem? Isn't that true?
Honestly, you'd have to point me to where that says. I actually don't recall that sentence.
That's fine. Mr. Horton said, "Can we pull up GXAS 12, which is in evidence, please, Isabel, and go to page 11. Let's start at the first page. Actually, so we can see what document we're looking at. So Ms. Sklar, this is the January 2022 Himalaya Coin White Paper. Did you review this?"
Yes.
Mr. Horton said, "Okay. If we can go to page 11, please, Ms. Loftus. And do you see the section of this page, Ms. Sklar, that's titled Structural Considerations?"
Yes.
Mr. Horton said, "If you could blow that up, please, Ms. Loftus." Ms. Sklar, if you could just read on this last paragraph, it starts, "Prospective members." And if you could just read that sentence, aloud.
Sure. The one that starts with prospective members?
Sure. It's the last paragraph, the first sentence.
Prospective members are advised that neither crypto assets or fiat currency may be held by members within the Himalaya ecosystem. And the Himalaya ecosystem does not provide. And none, it's a long sentence, and none of the Himalaya exchange or any other entity within the Himalaya ecosystem holds any necessary licenses or authorizations to provide any type of custody or other arrangements to facilitate this.
Ms. Sklar. That four-line sentence says that members cannot hold any crypto assets of any kind at the Himalaya ecosystem. Isn't that right?
No. It says.
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The Himalaya ecosystem does not provide. The sentence refers to that they didn't yet have the ability to do Bitcoin and Ether, which was their plan.
Let's start at the beginning of the sentence.
Okay.
There's a line and a half before we hit the first comma. Can you read that line, please?
Before the first comma. The prospective members.
That's right.
Okay. Prospective members are advised that neither crypto assets or fiat currency may be held by members within the Himalaya ecosystem.
Okay. That language from the white paper released by the Himalaya Exchange says that members cannot hold crypto assets within the Himalaya ecosystem. Does it not?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
I mean, the sentence says what it says, but I may disagree with how I read it.
Well.
The court said. So what is the question? Is the question what does it say?
Ms. Sklar, you interpret documents like this for a living, correct?
Mr. Skirek said, objection, Your Honor, relevance.
The court said. Overruled. Of course it's relevant.
Yes. Just give me.
And these documents are not written only for lawyers, isn't that right?
Right.
They're written for people who might invest in coins they might find on the internet, isn't that right?
Yes, but they're heavily edited by lots of lawyers and lots of other people. So this is not the clearest sentence I've ever seen, just to be honest.
Stipulating that it's not a clear sentence, does the first clause, before we get to the comma, say that neither crypto assets or fiat currency may be held by members within the Himalaya ecosystem? Yes or no? Is that what it says?
Mr. Skirek said, document speaks for itself.
It says that, but I disagree with what I think the sentence means.
Ms. Sklar, the question was.
The court said. The question wasn't how you interpret it, but what does it say?
I read it, though. I mean, it says what it says, and I've read it now a few times.
The court said okay.
Mr. Horton said, Your Honor, we can move on.
The court said. Excuse me?
Mr. Horton said, we can move on from the topic.
The court said go ahead.
Ms. Sklar, if somebody wanted to buy a credit on the Himalaya ecosystem, they would have to send US dollars to a Himalaya bank account, isn't that right?
Yes.
And you said in your testimony earlier that one reason that people use crypto tokens is to avoid using banks. Isn't that right?
Mr. Skirek said, no. Objection. Totally misstates the testimony.
Mr. Horton said, the question was for the witness, not Mr. Skirek.
The court said, sustained.
Mr. Horton said, maybe I misunderstood, Your Honor.
By Mr. Horton.
Ms. Sklar. Did you not testify that a reason to use cryptocurrency is to not use a bank for financial transactions?
Mr. Skirek said, same objection.
The court said. Overruled. You may answer.
I mentioned privacy and I mentioned not using third-party intermediaries like banks, yes.
Like banks, correct?
Yes.
But isn't it a fact that to buy a credit on the Himalaya ecosystem, you had to send US dollars through a wire transfer, isn't that right?
I mean, they had to send US dollars. Whether they were using Venmo or wire transfers. I actually don't know, but yes, the dollars had to get there, yes.
Is there a way to use Venmo or wire transfers without using a bank?
No, not usually. Well, no.
Not usually or no?
I mean, no.
And sending those US dollar wires to the Himalaya exchange, that transaction, that's not on the blockchain. Right?
A wire transfer, no.
It's not a cryptocurrency transaction when you do that, is it?
Right. It's not.
And after the exchange gets the US dollars from a customer, by the way, I'm sorry. One question. Are wire transfers anonymous?
No.
Can you send US dollars without revealing your true name?
Mr. Skirek said, asked and answered.
The court said. Overruled. You may answer.
When you send a wire transfer through your bank knows your name.
And after a customer sends US dollars through the wires and gets an H-coin credit, the customer at the Himalaya exchange, they have no right to get an actual H-coin token, isn't that true?
They get the credit, which is representative of a right. But are you asking whether they get an actual coin or?
Well, both of those. Do they get an actual coin?
I don't think so. I think they, at the time that they would get the credit.
And you said a moment ago that the credit is representative of a right to get the coin. Is that your testimony?
That's my understanding of what the credit system.
Mr. Horton said, Ms. Loftus, can we bring the white paper back up, please? GXAS 12, same page, page 11. If you can blow up the third paragraph from the top. I'm going to read this one this time, Ms. Sklar. Credits can only be used on the Himalaya exchange or within the Himalaya ecosystem, representing a right to participate in trading on the Himalaya exchange and do not carry any right to require their exchange for fiat currency or crypto assets.
Millimeter.
So holding an H coin or an H dollar credit at Himalaya did not carry a right to require its exchange for crypto. Isn't that what this says?
To require it, yes.
Mr. Horton said, okay. We can take it down, Ms. Loftus. The credits that customers could buy at the Himalaya exchange. Those credits couldn't be used anywhere else other than the Himalaya ecosystem, isn't that right?
Right.
When you go to Coinbase, for example, you can buy cryptocurrency and take it out of the exchange. Can't you?
Yes.
You could buy Bitcoin on Coinbase and sell it on Binance, isn't that right?
Mr. Sklar said, objection.
Bitcoin isn't issued by Coinbase, it's.
The court said you.
Oh, sorry.
The court said you may answer.
It's a little bit apples and oranges there because Bitcoin isn't issued by Coinbase. So of course you can get it out, it's not a closed system.
Well, my question isn't whether Coinbase issued the coin. It's whether you can buy Bitcoin at Coinbase and then sell it at a different exchange.
That is how they've set up their system, yes.
And cryptocurrencies are often listed on multiple exchanges, isn't that right?
Mr. Sklar said, objection.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
If the issuer has designed it that way, but it doesn't have to be.
And Bitcoin, for example, that's listed on over 100 exchanges, isn't that true?
Mr. Sklar said, objection, foundation.
The court said you may answer.
I mean, Bitcoin is the most decentralized cryptocurrency, no one even knows who created it, so yes. It's everywhere.
Tether, that's another stable coin, isn't that right?
Tether is a stable coin, yes.
And Tether is listed on 115 different exchanges, isn't that true?
Mr. Sklar said, objection.
The court said you may answer.
I can't confirm 115, but yes, it is the most highly traded stablecoin right now, yes.
You said a moment ago that Coinbase didn't issue Bitcoin, is that right?
Yes.
And you were drawing a comparison with the Himalaya exchange issuing its H coin and H dollar. Isn't that right?
I was, yes.
Binance is another cryptocurrency exchange, isn't that true?
Yes.
And they issued an exchange coin called BNB, isn't that right?
Yes.
And Binance exchange coin, BNB, is listed on exchanges other than Binance, isn't it?
Yes, as part of their design, yes.
In fact, it's listed on 62 other exchanges, isn't it?
Mr. Sklar said, objection.
The court said, you may answer if you know.
I don't know 62, but I know it is traded, yes.
Continued on next page. By Mr. Horton.
You said in your testimony today that you reviewed other witnesses' testimony in this case, is that right?
Yes.
Did you review Jesse Brown's testimony?
Yes.
Do you know that he's the former CEO of the Himalaya exchange?
Yes.
Do you recall that Mr. Brown testified that his understanding was that Himalaya coin wasn't listed at any other exchange because the exchange was worried that would cause its price to drop?
I can't if he said that, but I can't testify whether that's true or not. I don't know.
My question is not whether it's true. It is whether you read Jesse Brown, the former CEO of the exchange, testified that H coin wasn't listed at any other exchange to avoid its price dropping?
That's what he said.
And he was sitting right where you're sitting right now when he testified to that?
Mr. Skirek said, "Objection."
The court said, "She wasn't here for the testimony, so she can't answer."
Withdrawn. By the way, Ms. Sklar, Himalaya coin was not listed at any other exchange, was it?
It was not.
And $H was not listed any other exchange?
It was not.
Now speaking of $H, Ms. Sklar, that was described in the exchange's papers as a stable coin. Isn't that right?
Yes.
When I refer to it as HDO, you'll know I'm talking about the same thing?
Yes.
And sort of basic feature of stable coins is that they're redeemable, isn't that true?
It depends on the terms of the contract.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you familiar with any stable coins that can't be redeemed into the currency they're associated with?
Yes.
Which are those?
Tether, before it was subject to the CFTC's and New York State Department of Financial Services action, was only redeemable by people who had over 100,000. Which meant that the vast majority of average users of Tether could not redeem Tether.
But some could, right?
If you had over a $100,000 you could, yes.
And redeemable means that you can convert the stable coin into real-world currency, isn't that right?
Yes.
I don't say fiat because that's confusing, but that's what that means?
Yes.
And in fact a true fully reserved stable coin, it's redeemable one-to-one at all times, isn't it?
That's the intent, but even the best stable coins sometime drop down a peg to 98%, but, yes. That's the purpose of reserved coins, yes.
And if it wasn't redeemable at all times, it wouldn't be a true fully reserved stable coin, right?
Mr. Skirek said, "Objection."
The court said, "Overruled. You may answer."
The purpose of a redeemable full reserve stablecoin is to be able to redeem it.
Putting aside its purpose, Ms. Sklar. What makes it a true stable coin is that it's redeemable at all times, right?
Mr. Skirek said, "Asked and answered."
The court said, "You may answer."
It sort of goes back to what I just mentioned about Tether and the issuer. If you have a stable coin right now on Coinbase, for example, Coinbase doesn't have an obligation to redeem it back one-to-one. If you wanted to go to your issuer, you could try to do that, but it depends on the contract with the issuer.
Ms. Sklar, didn't you write the words? A true fully reserved stable coin is redeemable one-to-one for US dollars at all times. Didn't you write that?
Is that from something I wrote?
Isn't it?
It's possible. Could you just refresh my recollection?
Yes. Ms. Loftus, can we pull up GXC0207 and go to page 7 of it? Actually, let's go to the first page for the author. So, Ms. Sklar, just for the witness and the parties, please. This is the first page.
The interpreter said, "Your Honor, can you please remind all parties to please slow down, please?"
The court said, "Please slow down."
If you could go to page 2 for Ms. Sklar, please. That's your name there as an author of this document?
Yes.
Can we go to page 7, please? I may have the wrong page. Can we try the next page? At the top of page 8, Ms. Sklar, Ms. Loftus, can you highlight that 2-line fragment? Looking at this, Ms. Sklar, does it refresh your recollection that you wrote? A true fully reserved stable coin is 100% backed by cash and short-dated U.S. Treasuries and is redeemable one-to-one for U.S. dollars at all times?
Yes. The point is a true fully reserved stable coin. This paper is about stable coins that are different, but I did write this sentence, yes.
And, in fact, the Himalaya dollar was not redeemable for US dollars at all times, isn't that true?
I don't know that that's not true.
Ms. Loftus, if we can look back at the January 2022 $H white paper GXAS18. This is a document in evidence. If we can go to page 10, and if you could zoom in on the 4th paragraph down. Ms. Sklar, this paragraph says, additionally, a member may make a request to the Himalaya Exchange to accept a transfer of HDO credits in exchange for an equivalent payment in US dollars to be paid to the bank account of the member. Just stopping there, that's describing a redemption, right?
Yes.
However, such exchanges are at the discretion of the Himalaya Exchange. And the Himalaya Exchange is not obliged to fulfill any such request.
Yes, that's what it says, yes.
And the meaning of that is that $H were not redeemable into cash whenever a holder wanted. Isn't that right?
Mr. Skirek said, objection. These aren't her words.
The court said you may answer.
It says at the discretion.
What that means for non-lawyers is the Himalaya Exchange could decide not to redeem for dollars, right?
I mean, that's my understanding of the words at the discretion.
For any reason they wanted, right?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
I have no idea what the reasons.
The court said, overruled.
Or for no reason at all, right?
Mr. Skirek said, same objection.
The court said, overruled.
I didn't work there. I don't know what the reasons would be. Do I understand what the word at the discretion means? Yes.
That means that the exchange could decide no redemptions for $H for any reason we decide.
I don't know for any reasons. They might have their own reasons.
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
I'm not asking if they had reasons. I'm saying what this document says that you reviewed and testified about says that the Himalaya Exchange gets to decide for any reason it wants whether to redeem an HDO credit for US dollars.
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The court said, overruled. You may answer if you agree with him.
It says at the discretion. Does that mean any reason? I assume there must have been some internal process that it wasn't just any reason.
I'm not asking about internal processes.
I didn't work there, so I don't know.
And you don't know about any internal processes there, do you?
I don't know what this sentence refers to.
Did you review any minutes of board meetings there?
I did not, no.
Ms. Sklar, you're a regulatory lawyer. What limits on the discretion to deny redemption for $H are in this document?
Mr. Skirek said, objection. Foundation calls for speculation.
The court said, you can ask whether she knows of any limitation on their discretion.
The witness said, is that the question?
The court said, that's my question.
I'm not aware.
Okay. And the last sentence of this paragraph that we have up now says, references in this document. This is the January 2022 H white paper, references in this document to HCN, the Himalaya coin. A new coin issued by Himalaya International Financial Group, HCN or Himalaya coin. HDO or any other type of asset on an account at the exchange or through the Himalaya Pay app. References in this document to that list of things are references to credits corresponding to that asset. Is that what that says?
Yes.
In fact, Ms. Sklar, the Himalaya Exchange did refuse redemption for Himalaya dollars, isn't that true?
Mr. Skirek said, objection. Foundation.
The court said if you know.
I also thought they gave redemption.
You testified a moment ago that you read Jesse Brown's, the transcript of his testimony in this trial. Right?
Yes.
Do you remember that Mr. Brown testified that after the Himalaya Exchange's bank accounts were seized in the fall of 2022, the exchange stopped doing redemptions for $H?
After the accounts were seized, yes.
So the Himalaya Exchange stopped doing $H redemptions?
After its accounts were seized, yes.
What was the exchange using to back up $H with cash after its accounts were seized?
Mr. Skirek said, objection to form.
The court said, if you know you may answer.
I don't know actually.
I want to talk about those. Those are the reserves, right? Cash that backs up stable coins are reserves. Right?
Yes.
I want to talk about those reserves for a minute. You testified about reviewing documents that Himalaya sent to a company called Armanino, right?
Yes.
And Armanino at that time did audits of crypto companies, right?
Yeah.
Does Armanino still do audits of crypto companies?
No.
Do you know why they don't?
Mr. Skirek said, Objection, relevance, Your Honor.
The court said, "You may answer if you know."
I don't know why.
Did you review a document that said the exchange has $400 million more or less in cash reserves for its $?
Yes.
Do you remember that document had a part at the bottom that says, "I'm representing that this is accurate and complete"?
I believe so.
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
I think I know what document you're talking to.
The court said, "You may answer."
I think I know the document you're referring to. I can't recall that it says that sentence. But if you represent to me that it does, I mean I have no reason to believe it doesn't say that.
And crypto auditors rely on information that's given to them by the companies they're auditing, right?
All auditors do, not just for crypto.
Do you remember that Armanino document where information was represented by the Himalaya exchange? Do you remember it was signed by Jesse Brown?
Yes.
Do you know if Jesse Brown read that document before he signed it?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The court said, "If you know, you may answer."
I don't know.
Do you know sitting here today if the information in that document is accurate and complete as Mr. Brown represented with his signature?
All I know is what the document says and what was represented in it.
Did you speak with Priya Patel when you were learning about the Himalaya exchange?
I did not.
Do you know who she is?
Yes, from some references in documents, yes.
And she was a general counsel at the Himalaya exchange, isn't that right?
Yes.
Did you know that Ms. Patel gave that same document, the $400 million cash reserve document, to BitGo in January of 2020?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The court said, "If you know, you may answer."
I don't know.
And that document said that Himalaya exchange had $400 million in cash reserves in August 2022, right?
Mr. Skirek said, objection, Your Honor. She already said she doesn't know.
Which document, the one I saw?
The $400 million cash reserve.
Mr. Skirek said, excuse me.
The court said, "It's not clear that she said that she was aware of that document."
Let's take a quick look at it. Ms. Loftus, can you pull up GXBR 208A? It's in evidence. If you can go to the second page, please. This is one of the documents you looked at, right, Ms. Sklar?
Yes.
Can you blow up the top of the second page, please, Ms. Loftus? So this bank and fund holdings report signed by Mr. Brown is dated July 31, 2022. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And you said a moment ago you knew that the seizures of the Himalaya exchange's bank account were in the fall of 2022?
Mr. Skirek said, objection, mischaracterizes testimony.
The court said, "I don't recall her stating that."
You know that the Himalaya exchange's bank accounts were seized, right?
Yes.
And did you know that Ms. Patel, Priya Patel, who you know, gave this document to BitGo, the company you testified about in January of 2023?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The court said, "Do you know?"
I don't know. I don't know that.
And do you know that in January of 2023, the exchange's bank accounts had already been seized?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The court said, "If you know."
I know they were seized. If you represent to me that was the month that it happened, I have no reason to doubt that.
And what's your understanding of what the cash reserves were for $? After the exchange's accounts were seized?
I don't know that.
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
Ms. Sklar, you testified a little bit about reviewing documents about the exchange's relationship with BitGo, right?
Yes.
And BitGo, theirs was a contract with BitGo for wallet services, isn't that right?
Yes.
What happened with the BitGo/Himalaya exchange relationship? Do you know how it ended?
I mean, I know it ended. I don't know if I should be characterizing.
Do you know that BitGo terminated its relationship with the Himalaya exchange?
Yes.
And do you know that happened after BitGo found red flags in its account review of the Himalaya exchange?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The court said, "You may answer."
If that's what they said, I can't say what they said.
You also reviewed documents about the exchange's relationship with a company called Certic?
Certic, yes.
And a company called Jumio, is that right?
I didn't see the Jumio documents, but I know what they do.
You know about their relationship?
Yes.
And GXBR 208A, that wasn't the only Armanino document you looked at, right?
Mr. Skirek said, objection. You didn't show her that document.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
If I seen other Armanino documents.
Yes, in the course of this review.
Yes.
By the way, did the exchange ever publicly release its audits?
I'm not aware if they did.
But they said they would, right?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The court said if you know.
I don't know.
Can we pull up GXAS 18? It's the January 2022 $H white paper. And can we go to page 8 and blow up the third paragraph above the gold writing on the bottom? It says if the market, it's in the middle of the page. So this says, and you reviewed the January 2022 H-coin white paper that we're looking at. This says, the reserve will be managed, and that's referring to the $H reserve?
Yes.
With the aim of maintaining its value at a level equal to the value of all HDO in circulation, and will be subject to independent audit with audit reports made public. Isn't that what it says?
Yes.
Sitting here today, you don't know if that ever happened, right?
That 2022 document wasn't made public before it was seized in 2023, yeah.
My question, Ms. Sklar, is sitting here today. You don't know whether the Himalaya Exchange ever made any audit report public, do you?
Right, I'm not aware that they made it public.
In all of the documents you reviewed from the exchange. All the documents reviewed from third-party contractors and the time you spent on Etherscan. You didn't see any evidence that H-coin was backed by gold, did you?
Mr. Skirek said, objection, Foundation, calls for speculation.
The court said you may answer. If you know you can answer.
That it was backed by gold, no, I didn't see anything.
And you didn't see any balance sheet at the exchange reflecting that the exchange held gold or owned gold. Did you?
I saw something about them holding gold. I don't know. I can't recall what document it was though.
And you reviewed a lot of documents about $H reserves, right?
That they had reserves, yes.
And none of those documents said the reserves were in gold, right?
I don't recall seeing that.
And the Armanino audit document we just looked at a few moments ago. That was an HDO reserve audit document, right?
Yes.
That document didn't say anything about its reserves being gold, did it?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The court said you may answer.
It said cash.
But cash isn't gold, right?
Right.
You're a former regulator. If the HDO was backed by gold, would they need to tell their auditor that?
Mr. Skirek said, objection, calls for legal conclusion.
The court said you may answer.
There's technically no requirement for any of this when it comes to stablecoins. The purpose. The philosophy behind it is, yeah, when you say something is reserved by something, it should be reserved by that. If you say it's reserved by gold, then there should be gold. If you say it's cash or cash equivalents, which I also believe I saw somewhere too, which is what most stablecoins do. There's no regulatory requirement right now that says how to do it at all.
You testified earlier that you advise clients on white paper, is that right?
Right.
Have you advised clients on dealing with crypto audits?
Yes.
Would you advise a client to not tell its auditor about the nature of its?
Mr. Skirek said, objection, calls for speculation. She's not testifying as a legal expert.
Mr. Horton said, I'm asking about the facts of how she interacts with the clients she advises.
Mr. Skirek said, it's a hypothetical question about what she would do.
The court said, she's an expert. She can answer hypothetical questions.
I would tell my clients to be honest, but, my clients are also my clients. I don't control what it is they actually do in these situations, but I give my advice for them to be honest.
Now, in addition to reviewing documents, you reviewed some witness testimony in this case, is that right?
Yes.
Did you review everything that Miles Guo has said about H-Coin?
I have not, no.
Did you review anything that Miles Guo had said about H-Coin?
I actually don't think I have.
Did you review anything that Miles Guo said about H-Dollar?
No.
Ms. Loftus, can we please pull up what's in evidence as GXZ9 and go to the bottom of page 120 of this document? Please. Ms. Sklar, the person who's in the middle of the screenshot at the top of this page, do you know who that is?
I've never seen this before. That's Miles, right?
I couldn't hear you.
That's Miles Guo, right?
What's the date on the left-hand top left of this page?
October 20th, 2021.
That's less than 2 weeks before the launch of the Himalaya exchange, isn't it?
Yes.
And, Ms. Loftus, if you can scroll down to the next page 121 and zoom in on the second large body paragraph there. Ms. Sklar. The sentence the third line down starts with what is called, do you see that?
Yes.
Starting with what is called, can you please read aloud until I stop you?
Can I ask who is saying this? Is that Mr. Guo?
This document is in evidence as a statement of Miles Guo.
Okay.
Starting at, what is called, can you just please read aloud until I stop you?
What is called? I'm talking about your H-Coin's brother 7 designed it at that time.
I'll stop you there. You don't know who Brother 7 is, do you?
Yes.
You do know who Brother 7 is?
It's in the caption of the indictment.
And who is Brother 7?
Referring to Mr. Guo.
From Brother 7 designed it at that time, please keep reading.
It has the first one. It has the attribute of currency. Why? It is 20% gold. Awesome. It was born as currency on the first day, so it is value, and it is linked to gold, not to others. Clear gold directly. Do you want me to keep going?
Just the next sentence, please.
No matter how much it raises, 20% will turn into gold.
Thank you, Ms. Sklar. Ms. Loftus, if we can take us to 168 of this same document that is in evidence. If you could scroll up sort of the top part of the page with the screenshot. Do you see the date on this page is May 2022? Ms. Sklar?
Yes.
You see the URL tear says gnews.org?
Yes.
You know that G News is Miles Guo's media outlet, right?
Mr. Sklar said, objection, Foundation.
The court said, you may answer if you know.
I haven't been to this website, but if that's his, then I'll take your representation for it.
Do you see there's a pricing chart for H-Coin and H-Dollar in this screengram?
Yes.
Where does that pricing data come from?
G News.
My question is, where did G News get that information?
Mr. Sklar said, objection, how could she possibly know that?
The court said, if you happen to know you may answer.
Just reading off the screen, follow NFSC News on Getter. I don't know.
Ms. Loftus, if you could go down to the paragraph it straddles the bottom of 168 to the top of 169, please. I'll read some of this, Ms. Sklar, and I'll ask you to pick up where I leave off. And again, this is the same document we're looking at, its statements from G News. Luna coin plunged 99.99% to almost zero this week from $120 a month ago. And its stable coin UST plummeted from $1 to under 20 cents, exposing a major flaw in the current stable coin reserve in the digital currency industry. Can you start reading from there, please?
Miles emphasized in the live broadcast that the traditional financial institutions and many digital currency projects around the world collapse when faced with a run. You want me to continue?
Yes, just to the bottom of the text, please.
But the H-Coin stablecoin, HDO, H-Dollar can guarantee that no run will ever happen under any circumstances. The stablecoin, HDO and USD deposited by users always maintain a constant 1:1 exchange rate without any financial leverage or room for misappropriation.
Ms. Sklar, this says that HDO can guarantee that no run will ever happen under any circumstances. Do you see that?
Yes.
And a run refers to when the price of a stable coin basically plummets, right?
Technically, the run is when people are actually running to try to take their money out and the price may plummet because of that. But the run is the activity that might lead to it.
And if you hold a stable coin, you don't want there to be a run on it, right?
Right.
You're an expert in stable coin, right, Ms. Sklar?
Right.
And you read all about Himalaya dollar to testify today, isn't that right?
Mr. Skirek said, objection, asked and answered.
I read the documents I referred to, yes.
Ms. Sklar. What was the mechanism in H dollar to guarantee that a run would never happen under any circumstances? How did that work?
I think it was one of the documents you showed me before. The Armanino document shows that they were overcapitalized 1:1 for their stable coin. That they had slightly over 400 million. So they had enough also to probably pay out whatever fees or wind down expenses they needed on top of a 1:1.
Just so I'm clear, Ms. Sklar. Is it your testimony that H dollar could guarantee that no run would ever happen under any circumstances?
Mr. Skirek said, objection. That's not her testimony.
The court said, overruled.
I don't think anyone can guarantee anything, but the document showed that it had more than 1:1.
Is that the only stable coin that's over-collateralized as far as you know?
Some of them are supposed to be, but again there's no regulation requiring it. It's good practice.
Just so I understand.
To overcapitalize if you can.
Is your testimony that there are right now in the world stable coins that can guarantee people who may buy or hold them that they will never have a run, never under any circumstances?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The court said, overruled. She may answer. Go ahead.
They might have a run. A run is irrelevant if you have 1:1 backing. Give everyone their money back and it works.
The interpreter said, if the witness and counsel can slow down.
The court said, slow down.
It can't be guaranteed, right, Ms. Sklar?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
A run can't be guaranteed.
Right, can't be guaranteed?
Yes, runs can happen.
Ms. Loftus, if we can go back to the bottom of page 120, GXZ9. This is the same screenshot we were looking at a moment ago, isn't that right, Ms. Sklar?
Yes.
Same date, October 20th, 2021, and that's a few weeks before the exchange launch?
Yes.
Ms. Loftus, you can go down to the top of 123, please. If you could blow up the paragraph that starts with second, remember what Brother Seven said. I'll read some of this. And then ask you to read some Ms. Sklar. And again, this is a statement by Miles Gua. Second. Remember what Brother Seven said. The real H coin, you don't care about the first 3 months. You don't care if it rises to 1 million or falls to 0.001 cents. The real owner of H coin is 2 years later. And it can almost tell you whether you should hold it or not. H coin must be making money. Can you read the next 3 sentences?
If anyone loses money, I can say that I will compensate 100%. I give you 100%. Whoever loses money, I will bear it. Do you want me to keep going?
No, that's okay. You're also an expert on crypto trading coins, right?
Yes.
Are you aware of any crypto coin whose holders are guaranteed against any losses by a particular individual?
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The court said you may answer.
No, but I probably want to invest in that cryptocurrency. I mean yeah. No one does that. But not because they can't. Most people can't.
Ms. Sklar, what was the total amount you were paid to testify today?
It's somewhere around 70,000.
Mr. Horton said, no further questions, Your Honor.
The court said redirect.
The witness said, "Actually, sorry, can I revise that answer?"
The court said you may.
That's what SADA experts was paid. I get paid less than that. That's what the management company charges.
Mr. Horton said, "Thank you, Ms. Sklar."
Redirect examination. By Mr. Skirek.
Ms. Sklar, you were asked some questions on cross toward the beginning. About whether you were allowed to interview people from the Himalaya exchange. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Did you ask to interview anyone from the Himalaya exchange?
I did not.
Did we deny you the opportunity to interview anyone from the Himalaya exchange?
No.
Mr. Horton, also read you withdrawn. Mr. Horton also referred to a number of individuals and entities back toward the beginning of his cross-examination. Do you recognize any of those individuals or entities?
No.
Mountain of Spices.
No.
Does that mean anything to you?
No.
Now. Mr. Horton also asked you the question whether if you can't see a cryptocurrency on the public ledger, it doesn't exist. Do you recall him asking you that?
Yes.
Now, are you familiar with private blockchains?
Yes.
And what are private blockchains?
It's an internal blockchain, an internal ledger system, similar to how a public blockchain would look. But it's internal. One popular example is JP Morgan Coin, that's for JP Morgan. They have an internal blockchain and an internal coin. It's not public. Blockchain isn't public.
And on a private blockchain, you can't see those cryptocurrencies on the public blockchain, right?
Right.
And on a centralized exchange, you can't see transactions reflected on the public blockchain, right?
Right. That's traditionally how it works. I have crypto as I mentioned. I have no idea where it is on the blockchain cause I use a centralized exchange to do transactions.
Would you agree with me that those are at least two examples there of transactions on a blockchain that might not be publicly viewable from outside?
Mr. Horton said, "Objection to the compound leading question."
The court said, "Can you break it down, please?"
Would you agree with me that a private blockchain? The use for a private blockchain cannot be viewed from the public blockchain.
Mr. Horton said, "Objection, asked and answered."
Mr. Skirek said, "You can't object and."
The court said you may answer.
If it's a private blockchain, it wouldn't be reflected on the public blockchain.
Right. And same question with respect to transactions on a centralized exchange. Would those also not be viewable on a public blockchain?
Right. If that's the way the centralized exchange has it set up, as many do, yes. You don't see the individual transaction on the blockchain.
Would you agree with me that's at least two examples of cryptocurrency transactions that are not viewable from a public blockchain?
Yes.
Now. You were also asked several questions by Mr. Horton about the internal ledger nature of the Himalaya exchange. You recall those?
Yes.
And he asked whether the Himalaya exchange's internal system sort of would meet your expectation of what an internal ledger system would look like. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Now. Do you have a specific expectation of what an internal ledger system would look like at a centralized exchange?
No.
And why is that?
Each exchange would have its own software and technology which would be proprietary, frankly. So even if I did know what some of these systems might look like, those would be things I learn from privileged conversations.
Now, you were asked on cross whether a Himalaya exchange user could hold tokens in their own wallet. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you know whether that was possible as a technical matter?
Not aware whether it was or wasn't a technical matter or not.
Sorry, just to be clear. As a technical matter, was that possible?
Mr. Horton said, "Objection, asked and answered."
The court said, "Sustained."
Is it your understanding that it was technically possible? But it was part of the closed system of the Himalaya exchange not to transmit tokens to customer wallets?
Mr. Horton said, "Objection, leading."
The court said, "If you could not ask leading questions, please."
What's your understanding of what was technically possible to do in terms of transferring tokens on the Himalaya exchange?
It was my understanding that they were developing that technology and that build-out, and that was also why they were working with BitGo and working to develop ways of having wallets and connecting wallets as well as other crypto.
And you testified both on direct and cross about the closed nature of the Himalaya exchange system. Right.
Yes.
Is it surprising to you given that closed system that the exchange didn't permit users to send tokens off the exchange?
Mr. Horton said, objection, leading, testifying.
The court said, sustained.
In a closed exchange, in your experience, is it typical for an exchange to allow customers to send tokens off exchange?
Mr. Horton said, same objection.
The court said, you can answer.
If the intent is to create a closed system, the purpose of the token is to be used through how the system is designed. And in this case, eventually the purpose was, according to the white papers, to allow merchants to exchange the tokens too so that you could use it as an exchange of value.
That's right. And so in your experience as an expert in this industry, is there anything unusual about having a closed system like the Himalaya exchange?
Mr. Horton said, the question was previously objected to. It's sustained, leading.
The court said, sustained.
What, if anything, is unusual in your experience? Withdrawn. Now. In response to a number of Mr. Horton's questions, I believe you started to testify or at least tried to about the long-term plans of the Himalaya exchange. Do you recall that?
Mr. Horton said, objection.
The court said, sustained.
Do you recall trying to testify about the long-term plans of the Himalaya exchange?
Mr. Horton said, same objection, Your Honor.
The court said, sustained.
What were the long-term plans of the Himalaya exchange, Ms. Sklar?
Mr. Horton said, objection, lack of foundation to the exchange long-term plans.
Mr. Sklar said, Your Honor, she got all the foundation one could ask for. She's read all the white papers which she described earlier as talking about the long-term plans.
The court said, long-term plans as to?
Mr. Sklar said, the exchange the long-term plans for its system, Your Honor.
Mr. Horton said, objection, about the long-term plans of a group of people she testified she never met.
Mr. Sklar said, whether she met them or not.
The court said, can you be more specific?
Mr. Sklar said, I will try. We'll see if Mr. Horton objects. Do you recall that part of the long-term plan of the exchange was to permit the deposit of other cryptocurrencies with the exchange?
Mr. Horton said, objection, leading.
The court said, sustained.
Mr. Sklar said, Your Honor, can I have a brief sidebar, please?
The court said, okay.
Continued on next page. At sidebar.
Mr. Sklar said, Your Honor, I believe I'm permitted to lead on redirect.
Ms. Schrofa said, that is the government's position in every single trial. And the Southern District of New York has always taken the position that the statute is clear that they can lead on redirect. And they have led on redirect throughout this entire case.
Mr. Sklar said, there's no mystery, Your Honor. I'm just asking about her understanding about the long-term plan of the exchange. I can either ask in a general way or in a specific way which the government has also objected to.
The court said, you can ask long-term plans with respect to.
Mr. Sklar said, I thought I just did that and that also drew an objection.
Mr. Horton said, from our perspective I think there's leading and then there's leading, and some of Mr. Sklar's questions put a developed argument into his witness's mouth and I objected.
The court said, I feel like you can get to this answer fairly easily.
Mr. Sklar said, Your Honor. I just ask that I be permitted to some degree. This is obviously an appropriate topic for questions. The government is just going to be objecting on form. I suppose we could be here all day until we get one that's not objected to.
Ms. Schrofa said, I'll certainly cite this portion of the transcript in future trials that the government doesn't think we're not allowed to lead on redirect.
The court said, so instead of talking with your adversary, talk to me.
Ms. Schrofa said, sorry about that, Your Honor. I think that the government's position has always been in this trial and in every trial, and I note the silence from the government on this point, that they're allowed to lead. And the statute says you can. You are permitted to lead on redirect examination, so that's my point.
Mr. Finkel said, happy to respond on behalf of the government. as Mr. Horton said quite correctly. There's leading, and then there's leading. And thank you for shaking your head.
The court said, Mr. Finkel.
Mr. Finkel said, sorry, Your Honor.
The court said, that was very snarky.
Mr. Finkel said, you're right. I apologize. As Mr. Skirek was doing. It was more leading than I think is appropriate, like Mr. Horton said, and that's why he raised the objection.
The court said, okay. What do you understand were the plans for X, okay?
Continued on next page. In open court.
Mr. Skirek said, may I, Your Honor?
The court said, go ahead.
By Mr. Skirek.
Ms. Sklar. What was your understanding of the exchange's long-term plans when it comes to other cryptocurrency besides HCN and HDO?
From my understanding, it was to eventually accept Ether and Bitcoin, which were the two largest cryptocurrencies in circulation, to be used instead of US dollars to buy HCN and HDO.
Fair to say they would be open to other cryptocurrencies.
Mr. Horton said, objection to leading.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
To accepting other cryptocurrencies as a meat of exchange for other cryptocurrency. Whether they listed it for trading, I don't know that was the plan in order to keep a close system. But to make it more inclusive in what types of crypto they were accepting, yes.
What was your understanding about the exchange's long-term plan when it comes to eventually permitting the tokens to trade themselves?
The long-term plan was for it to be a closed system in that it would be trading HCN and HDO, but that they would be able to translate it back and forth into US dollars and into other crypto and to be used by merchants they selected.
And that would replace the credit system?
Yes.
And what was your understanding of the long-term plan to permit HCN to be traded off the Himalaya exchange?
I'm not sure I know exactly what their long-term plan was. But presumably any crypto that gains traction does get traded on a secondary market.
Mr. Horton said, objection, motion to strike. The testimony is that she doesn't know the plan and the speculation.
The court said, sustained.
In your experience, is it common for a centralized exchange to have a period of development towards its long-term plans?
Yes.
In your understanding, where was Himalaya Exchange in its development at the end of 2021 and in 2022?
There is still building out the technology, developing their user base. Obviously editing their white papers and the philosophy and the use cases of what they wanted it to look like. Crypto is no different than any other startup. There's an idea. You need money and users for it to make sense. And you continue to develop it depending also on what your users want.
And lastly, Ms. Sklar. What was your understanding of the exchange's long-term plans with respect to something called HPay?
HPay would be a way to transmit crypto, some more of either more of a means of exchange or just a payment system. So sort of as I stated, as I saw it. Like their Venmo system, so you could actually send the coin to someone else without going through the exchange itself.
Now, if we could please pull up what's in evidence as Government Exhibit BR208A, and if we could please go to the second page of this. Now, Ms. Sklar, you recall being asked some questions about this document?
Yes.
And do you recall testifying that you believe that this document shows that the HDO tokens withdrawn? You recall testifying that in your view this document shows that HDO in circulation was over-collateralized?
Yes.
Can you just explain what you mean by that?
If you look at the top line, it's over 401 million, that's US dollars held in the bank accounts. And if you go to the bottom line, which is collateralize HDO, which is on the platform, you can see that number is slightly smaller, which means they're holding more money. More dollars in the bank accounts than are on the collateralized HDO credits.
And now you were asked some questions about the white papers. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you were specifically pointed to some portion of the white paper that said it was in the Himalaya Exchange's discretion whether or not to pay redemptions in dollars. You recall that?
Yes.
In your experience, is that provision a common one in cryptocurrency exchanges?
Mr. Horton said, objection.
The court said, you may answer.
I can't say how common it is, but it's not unusual to create your own redemption policies. It's a contract like any other that you're signing onto when you buy cryptocurrency, as well as any sort of other thing you might be buying.
And is it common in your experience to have some restrictions on redemptions from an exchange?
Mr. Horton said, same objection, Your Honor.
The court said you may answer.
Yes, for startup exchanges, yes.
And you testified that you just don't have any information with respect to how the exchange exercised that discretion. Do you?
I don't.
Now. You were asked several questions by Mr. Horton about whether HDO ceased to be backed by dollars at the point that the government seized the Himalaya Exchange bank accounts. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Prior to the time that the Himalaya Exchange accounts were seized by the U.S. government. Have you seen anything that indicates to you that HDO was not fully backed?
No.
You were asked several questions by Mr. Horton to the effect that the Himalaya Exchange halted redemptions when its account were seized by the U.S. government. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Have you seen anything in this case that indicates that the Himalaya Exchange did not honor redemption consistent with its policy prior to the seizure?
No.
You were asked a series of questions by Mr. Horton about audit report issued by Armanino and whether they were made public. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you know whether the audit reports withdrawn? Do you know whether the Himalaya Exchange accounts were seized before it could make any audit reports public?
Mr. Horton said, objection.
Mr. Skirek said, she was asked a whole series of questions about audits.
The court said you may answer.
The audit report wasn't issued before the accounts were seized. Is that the question?
The question is, do you know whether the timing of the account seizure affected the public release of the audit report?
Mr. Horton said, objection, calls for speculation.
The court said, you may answer if you know.
I don't know.
Now, you were asked several questions about gold backing. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And do you know that the only representations about gold backing at all in this case relate to HCN? Not HDO.
I mean, that's my understanding.
Right. Because HDO is a stable coin.
Yes.
By dollars?
Yes.
Now were you asked to review any gold reserve issue as part of your expert testimony today?
No.
So you wouldn't know one way or the other about any gold reserves because it wasn't in scope for you. Right.
Mr. Horton said, objection.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
I don't know.
Now. You were shown by Mr. Horton the transcript of statements by Mr. Gua to the effect that no run could happen. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Now, can you just describe to us what a run is, please?
Sure. A run is generally when people panic and they run. The way it's used in traditional financial senses is people used to actually run to the bank and pull their money out. Now a run can be like electronic in the crypto world. It happened with another crypto. Everyone ran to get redemptions or to try to sell it. Now runs can happen through social media or other ways. It's when everyone tries to get money back. It's a process.
Understood. And what role does confidence play in a run?
If you have confidence that what you're investing in is backed and something real behind it, there isn't an incentive to run. A run is usually psychological effect that happens when people run to the bank or they run to sell something.
If they lose confidence, fair.
Yes.
And adversely, if people believe that the reserves are there, there's no reason for a run, right?
Mr. Horton said, object to the leading.
The court said, overruled. You can answer.
Again, like I said, it is mainly a psychological effect. So if you don't have a reason to make a run on something, then you wouldn't need to.
And would maintaining a cash reserve 1-to-1 of all HDO in circulation provide just the kind of confidence to prevent a run in your view?
Yes, because that's also the purpose of a stable coin, is that you're supposed to have confidence in it. Having the backing, unlike other forms of crypto which are more speculative and are intended to go up and down.
Mr. Skirek said, thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
The court said recross.
Mr. Horton said, very brief.
Cross-examination. By Mr. Horton.
Ms. Sklar. You were just asked some questions by Mr. Skirek on redirect about whether Miles Gua ever said $H was backed by gold. Do you remember that?
Mr. Skirek said, objection, misstates the testimony.
It was whether it was backed by I'm sorry.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
Ms. Loftus, can you please pull up GXZ9 at the top of 105 and blow up the first 2 lines? This is a document in evidence at GXZ9. It's a statement from Miles Gua. Can you read the line that starts with the word there? Read that sentence, please.
This is H dollars backing H coins, and H dollars is backed by Himalaya Reserve as well as gold.
We can take that down, Ms. Loftus. Ms. Sklar. You were also asked questions by Mr. Skirek about Himalaya Exchange future plans, right?
Yes.
Ms. Loftus, if you can go to page 120 at GXZ9. If you could blow up the top half of this page. Do you see the date at the top left?
Yes.
That's September 29, 2021, right?
Yes.
That's just a few weeks before the exchange launched in November 1st of this year, right?
Yes.
This is highlights of Miles Gua's live broadcast on that same day, right?
Yes.
Can you read the sentence below it, please?
The safest virtual coin at the moment is the Himalaya coin because 20% of the value is anchored to gold.
Does that say the safest coin at the moment, Ms. Sklar?
That's what that sentence says.
Mr. Skirek said, objection.
The court said, overruled.
That's what the sentence says, yes.
Mr. Horton said, 1 moment, please. Thank you, Ms. Sklar. No further questions from us.
Mr. Skirek said, no further questions, Your Honor.
The court said, thank you, you may step out.
Witness excused.
The court said, members of the jury, it's 4:59. We'll continue tomorrow at 9:30, so I'll expect you to, as usual, be ready to come into the courtroom at this time. Remember that you're not allowed to discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Don't permit anyone to discuss the case in your presence. Don't read, watch or listen to anything from any source that touches on the subject matter of this case. Have a good evening.
Continued on next page. Jury not present.
The court said, please be seated. Is there anything before we start tomorrow?
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, briefly a couple of points. One thing to note with respect to the direct examinations of both of the witnesses today. There were a lot of commentary after each answer. So the witness would give an answer and the questioner would say thank you or some kind of acknowledgement. We would just ask that the court police that and limit it. We don't think that's at all appropriate in a direct examination to kind of validate or acknowledge the answer that is given. It's commentary. It shouldn't be existent. It's also akin to the government's continuing objection to the direct questions being overly leading. Again, as we discussed at sidebar, we understand it's within the court's discretion. We don't object to certain leading questions particularly for efficiency. But when they veer into testimonial and they bake into the questions some judgment that's implicit that's being placed into the mouth of the witness, we would object. We note under Rule 611 it's up to the court's discretion to what extent, if any, to permit leading questions on direct, so we would just note that point. Separate and apart from that, we would ask if the defense could advise how many witnesses it currently expects to get through tomorrow for planning purposes, and also because we understand there was some question about scheduling issues that might arise for certain witnesses. We'd just like an update on what we expect tomorrow.
Ms. Strofa said, Your Honor, I think what we are going to have to adjust the roll call because 2 of our witnesses have to be out of the United States by the end of day tomorrow. So it may involve a brief reshuffling. I'm happy to get back to the government in about 30 minutes. I need to talk to the rest of the team and I've been in here all day. We've had 2 witnesses waiting here in the room across all day. So actually we ran out of room, so one was in the cafeteria, but anyway.
Ms. Murray said, Which witnesses, Your Honor?
The court said, if you'll please let the prosecution know.
Ms. Strofa said, in 30 minutes. I'm not a scout, but 30 minutes it is.
The court said, so with regard to the leading and the commentary, too much commentary diminished the positive effects of leading, so not too much leading and no commentary. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Adjourned to July 3, 2024 at 9 a.m.